Greetings, mighty companions, and welcome back to Practical and Healing Applications of A Course in Miracles with me, Anna Rebecca Quinn. Thank you for joining this broadcast. And on this broadcast, we are going to be studying from A Course in Miracles. A Course in Miracles is a self-study curriculum whose purpose is to restore peace of mind to us. It is a curriculum that consists of a text, a workbook, and a teacher's manual. It is a self-study curriculum that many people find helpful to study with a teacher, facilitator, translator. And that's what I am. I am a translator, facilitator of this curriculum. So I've been studying this curriculum for 40 years and applying it, using it in my own life. And so my function as a Course in Miracles teacher is to help people to understand what it's saying and to help them to understand how it is instructing us how to apply the concepts that are in this curriculum. So that's my job, to be a translator, to help folks understand what it's saying and to help folks understand how it itself is teaching us how to apply these ideas. And the result of understanding these ideas and applying these ideas is miracles. Miracles of peace, joy, abundance, healing. The Course in Miracles says that the experience of peace, joy, abundance, love, safety, that is natural. Says it's not a miracle to experience peace. It's allowing yourself to experience what is natural. So we're going to be talking about how to allow yourself to experience your natural state of peace, joy, abundance, connection. So that's just a little thumbnail sketch of what A Course in Miracles is. It is a curriculum. It's a book that looks like this. This is what it looks like. This is the edited version. This is Robert Perry's edition that has the unedited version with Robert Perry's notes. There are many different covers for A Course in Miracles, but that's what it looks like. It's a book, and there are several different editions of it, but same content, just different forms. So that's what we're going to be studying from today. And I am going to, let's see here. I'm going to see if I am going to check out to see if I am live on Facebook. Let me see here if I am. Let's see here. Okay. It says it's friends, but I would like it to be public. So, okay, well, let's see if I can edit it here. See if it's okay. Right now it just says friends, so it's not, looks like it's not public yet, but I will have somebody see if they can post it as well. All right. So at least we're somewhat public on Facebook. Okay. All right. Good enough for now. All right. Okay. So, and then when you tune in, let me know if you can hear and see me okay. And then we'll begin. All right. Let's see here. We can. Okay. Great. Okay, so now I'm going to put here on the screen where we're going to be reading from in A Course in Miracles. One of my goals as a Course in Miracles teacher is to help people to be able to study the Course in Miracles themselves. So my philosophy as a teacher of the Course is I want to teach people how to fish for themselves. Instead of feeding people a fish for a day, I want to teach people how to fish for themselves and learn how to study A Course in Miracles for themselves. so that they will no longer need a teacher of A Course in Miracles. That's my purpose. So I want to help you learn how to read, how to understand and apply A Course in Miracles for yourself, so that you can really access and utilize the miraculous resource that A Course in Miracles is. A Course in Miracles is a miraculous resource for peace, for healing, for joy, for a joyous, happy, abundant life. Right. So that's my purpose there. And this is where we are going to be reading today. We're going to be in chapter 11, section 5, the dynamics of the ego. All right, let me check here, see if we are live. Let's see here. And we are public on YouTube. Wonderful. Okay, great. So what we're going to be talking about today is the dynamics of the ego. And the Course in Miracles in this section puts the word dynamics in quotations. So dynamics meaning the laws of, the principles of the how something works, the dynamics of something. And we're going to be talking about the ego. We're going to be talking about how the ego works, what is the ego. And the Course in Miracles describes and defines the ego as a belief system that was learned and adopted by us, by people who did not know the truth about themselves and who have then taught the ego belief system to us. So the ego is a belief system that is false, that is not true about who we are and what we are. And it's a belief system about what the nature of reality is that is false. It is not true. Okay. And it's a belief system that was developed by the ego. So this is a belief system that we have learned about who and what we are that is false. And this belief system that we have learned about who and what we are that is false is a belief system that is based on fear. And in this belief system called the ego, fear is real and love is not. In the ego's belief system, fear is happiness, right? And in the ego's belief system, what we are is guilty, and what we are is a body that will die. So, and in the ego's belief system, we are a body that dies, and we are guilty, and we are separate from God, and we are separate from everything that exists. Okay. So the ego's belief system is a belief system based on the lie that we are a body, that we are separate from our source, and that we are separate from all aspects of creation. So that's what the ego is. It is a belief system. It is what we have learned from the past, from people who did not know the truth about themselves. So in the Course in Miracles, there is the ego belief system. There's the ego, a belief system based on fear is real and separation. And there is God, right? So there's the ego belief system, and there's God. According to A Course in Miracles, the ego belief system was not created by God. It has nothing to do with God. And the ego's belief system is the exact opposite of everything that God is and that God has established as reality for all of creation. And the Course in Miracles tells us that the only thing that is real and true in reality, the only thing that has a lasting reality is what God has established as reality. And the Course in Miracles defines God as love, as only love, a mind that is only loving, that extends only love, and that has established love as the only reality. That is what God is, according to A Course in Miracles. God is nothing like what we have learned about God in the past. The way the Course in Miracles defines and describes God is that God is the original, only loving, unlimited mind of love that has created us, and that God has created us like God, which means only loving and only lovable and only lasting forever. And the Course tells us that God, as the source of our reality, our creator, has created us to be just like God. Not God, but that God has created us to be just like God, which means unlimitedly creative. God is a creator who only creates. He doesn't destroy, not a he or a she. God is reality. God is our loving, only loving source. And that God has created us to be just like God is a creator who creates like God. So a creator who creates only the good, the good, the loving, the holy, and the true. So we're going to be hearing about, but today we're going to be talking about the dynamics of the ego. We're going to be doing a dissection of the ego. We're going to learn about the thought system that is the ego, that most of the world believes, unfortunately, at this time. We're going to be learning about what the ego is and how it works. What is the ego's purpose? What is the ego always trying to accomplish? Where did the ego come from? What is it that comes from the ego? How to recognize when you are using the thinking with the ego thought system instead of reality. The reality is established by God, who is only love. So that's what we're going to be hearing about. And I titled this section, what did I title this section to be? Let's see. Let me see. Yes, the dynamics of fear and how to dispel it. So we're going to be talking about where did fear come from? What is fear? How does fear work? And what does fear produce? And how to dispel it. That's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, does that sound practical? That's what we're going to be talking about. So the ego, not only is the ego a belief system that we've learned that is false, we are also told in this section and throughout the course that the ego's thought system is based on separation. I'm separate from my source and I'm separate from everything that lives, and that's why I should be afraid. I'm separate from source. I'm separate from everything that lives, and that's why I should be afraid, because I'm alone, right? If you are separate from your loving source and you're separate and disconnected from all of life, then what could you be but afraid? So the ego belief system is the source of fear. It is fear. It produces only the symptoms of fear. And the only way to dispel that fear and all of the effects of fear is to understand the truth about fear, what fear is. That's it. You don't dispel fear or any of the symptoms of fear without understanding what fear is, where it come from, what it's trying to accomplish. Only then do you go, oh, it's not true, it's not real, and so I am not going to believe in that anymore. And then all the effects of fear, all the experience of fear and all the effects of fear is dispelled. It disappears. So the Course in Miracles is telling us that that all of our suffering is an effect of the belief that fear is real. So all of our suffering, all of our problems, all of our conflict, it's all coming from fear. And it's telling us that fear, because it isn't created by God, that it isn't real, it isn't true. And so all the effects of our fear are also not true, they're not real. And so the Course tells us that anything that's coming from fear, first of all, it tells us that what fear is and what comes from fear is an illusion. Okay. Now, what is an illusion? An illusion is something that seems real to us, that we believe is real and true, but it is not. That's what an illusion is. I think it's real and true, but it's not. It was an illusion, right? And so, whatever is what the fear itself, and then the symptoms of fear, the Course in Miracles calls that an illusion, a deception, a misperception. So we're going to talk about what is fear and how to dispel fear, and also to dispel all the effects of fear. So remember, whatever you are experiencing that is not joyful and abundant and loving and safe, that is fear and an effect of fear. So whatever you're experiencing that's not joyous, happy, loving, eternal, that is fear and one of the symptoms of fear. Now, so basically all our problems are symptoms of fear, and the only way to dispel these problems is to learn the truth about the fear itself. So we look at our problems and we go, this is coming from fear. Oh, yeah. The Course has taught me that fear isn't real. And so I no longer believe in that fear. I choose to no longer believe in that lie. And then all the symptoms and the side effects of that fear are dispelled. They go when you realize the truth. It's just like the metaphor of the darkness in a room, a dark room. So when you walk into a dark room and you you flick the light switch, what happens to the darkness in the room? Okay. The darkness just disappears. You didn't have to beat up the darkness. You didn't have to yell at it and scream at it and attack it. It just automatically disappeared and went back to where? Nowhere. So that's a great metaphor for how you dispel fear and the effects of fear. I know it seems like the ego tells us that whatever problem we're experiencing is coming from something outside of us, or it's telling us that the problem is coming from either an inadequacy or failure within us, or it's telling us it's coming from something that's attacking us outside of us. But of course, in Miracles is telling us that all of our problems, all of our suffering is coming from our belief in the lie of fear. And so the only way to get rid of the fear and all the symptoms of the fear is to accept and to recognize the truth about the fear, that it's not true. Okay. And then the fear is dispelled, and then all the symptoms of the fear are dispelled along with it. So that's what we're going to hear about today. And hi, Bridget. Lovely to see you. And Bridget, can you see me and hear me okay? All right. All right. So you can see here on the screen where we're at. Chapter 11, Section 5. And the title of this is the so-called dynamics of the ego. Thank you, Bridget. Okay. So are you ready to hear the truth about the ego and dispel it and its effects? Does that sound practical? Do you have any effects of fear right now? Do you have any problems or suffering right now that you would like to dispel, that you would like to be free from? Whatever those are, apply these ideas to whatever that is today. Okay? Whatever ways you're feeling afraid, whatever ways you're suffering, whatever ways you have conflict in your life right now. Apply these ideas to that. And if you are having a challenge in how to do that, then don't hesitate to send me a message here and comment and say, yes, what about this? What about that? What about this symptom of fear? That doesn't seem like an illusion. It seems very real, and I'm very afraid. What about that? Don't hesitate to ask for help in applying these ideas to any area that you are experiencing conflict or suffering with. Okay, beautiful. So here we go. The so-called dynamics of fear. No one can escape from their problems, which the Course calls illusions, unless they look at them. So you can't escape from this problem until you look at it. Now, the first thing is that's the opposite of the way that we are taught to deal with our problems. To go, what is this problem? We are taught to look outside ourselves. We're taught to try to change it, fix it, blame it, not understand it. So until you understand the problem, what it is, where it's coming from, then you will never be able to dispel it. Now, so this is telling us there's a way to dispel our problems. And the first thing we're told about that is that we need to look at the problem. Because by not looking at the problem, then your problem is protected. So the ego tells you, don't look at the problem and try to understand it. Try to fix the external expression of it. Try to blame the problem on something outside of you. See the problem as coming to you from outside of you. And that's the way you should handle your problems. Right? That's what the world teaches us about how to handle our problems, our conflict. But the Course in Miracles says the first thing you got to do is look at it, because if you don't look at it and you try to numb yourself from it, suppress it or repress it, not think about it, distract yourself from that problem, you are just protecting that problem. You're keeping that problem. All right. Then it tells us in sentence number 2, there is no need to shrink from the ego and the problems that your ego is producing. There's no need to shrink from the problem. There's no need to hide from the problem. There's no need to pretend that problem doesn't exist. There's no need to hide that problem. There's no need to suppress or repress your problems. There's no need to shrink from them, hide from them, not look at them. There's no need to do that, because the problems, which the Course calls illusions, they cannot be dangerous. Did you know that? The problem, the illusions from which you are suffering, the Course in Miracles tells us, don't be afraid to look at them, because they are not dangerous. They cannot be dangerous, right? Why is it that in reality our problems cannot be dangerous? Because our problems are representations of something that isn't true. So what's not true and what's not real and doesn't really exist in reality, how could it be dangerous? So the only reason that our problems seem scary and dangerous is because we're not looking at them. And so we're not seeing them as they are for what they are, nothing but a lie we learned about ourselves in the past. And so since we're not looking at them, then we can't learn the truth about them. We don't know that they can't hurt us. We don't know that they cannot be dangerous because we're not looking at them, because we're afraid of them. We're afraid to look at them. And that's why we're all distraction addicts because we're afraid to look at our problems. We're afraid to look at our egos. And so instead of looking at our egos and going, well, what is this? And where did it come from? And what does it mean? And is it real? Is it even real? The thing I fear, the thing I'm suffering about, am I suffering because of something that's actually real and true about me or reality? So our way of handling problems has been distraction, projection, blame, suppression, repression. But all that does is it protects our problems. All right. So, hi, Greg. I see you there. Greg, would you be willing to post this class into my Facebook group, my Facebook page? I see that it is friends only, but I'd like for it to be for everybody. So would you be willing to post this link into my Facebook page? Thanks, honey, for doing that. All right. Okay. So then it says, we are ready to look more closely at the ego's thought system. Why? Well, because together we have the lamp, we have the light, we have the understanding that will dispel the ego's thought system. And since you realize you don't want the ego's thought system, then you must be ready. So that's how the voice of the course, our teacher, realizes that we are ready, because we are together, and together we have the truth that will dispel our ego's thought system. So that's how our teacher knows that we're ready. Okay? We're together and we are ready and willing to look at the ego's thought system together. Now, and then I love how it says, and since you realize you don't want the ego's thought system, and we're together, that's how our teacher knows that we're ready. So this is chapter 11. And so the voice of the course, the teacher, is assuming that, that we don't want the ego, right? By chapter 11, you realize that it's the ego's thought system that is the source of all of our suffering, all of our problems, all of our pain, right? That's what you've learned by chapter 11 if you've been studying Course in Miracles, that the ego thought system, which is all based on lies about who and what we are, is the opposite of our loving reality, and it's causing all of our issues. So by now, it's assuming that you'd be like, I don't want the ego. I don't want to believe what I've learned from the past about how I'm guilty and I'm separate and I'm alone and lack is real and I should be afraid of everything and fear is happiness. That's what we learned. The ego's thought system is a thought system that tells us that fear is real and love is not, and that we should be afraid of everyone and everything and ourselves. And the ego's thought system tells us that fear is happiness. Well, if you just feel enough fear, you'll be happy. If you just have enough fear, then you'll be safe. That's what the ego's thought system is teaching us. So here we are, we're together. We've realized we don't want the ego's thought system. It's causing all the problems that we're experiencing. And so now we are ready to look more closely at the ego's thought system so that we can dispel it. Okay? You can't dispel the ego's thought system until you look at it and go, now, what does the ego believe? And what is the ego teaching me? And what is it I've learned from the ego? And I don't want that anymore. How could I be happy if I'm afraid and feeling guilty all the time? All right. So it says, so as we look at the ego's thought system together, let us be very calm. Let us very calmly look at what the ego believes and wants us to believe, so that we're afraid all the time of everything. Let us be very calm in this, and let us be very calm because all we're doing is merely looking honestly for the truth. That's all we're doing. Right? We're just looking, what is the truth? Is it true that I'm unloving and unlovable? Is it true that I'm a bad person and guilty and deserve punishment? Is it true that I'm mortal, fallible, and full of sin? Is it true that I'm really alone? Is it true that I'm separate from my source and separate, disconnected from all of life? Is that really true? We're just merely looking honestly for truth. That's what we're doing here together in looking at the ego. So, the so-called dynamics of the ego will be our lesson for a while. Why? Because we must look first at the ego's thought system and how the ego works in order to look beyond the ego's thought system and how it works. And the reason that we got to look at it and see how it works and see how it's what it's saying is because not because it's real and true and big. It's because we've made it real. The only reason we need to look at the ego and look honestly for the truth is because we've made the ego thought system real. Not because it's real in itself and you got to look at it, but you made it real. So now we got to look at it. You've made the guilt and the fear and the separation and the loss and the loneliness and the pain and suffering real. So now we got to look at it and look for the truth. Okay, the truth that is behind it. All right. So that's going to be our lesson for today. So the ego is not real, but since you made it real, since you think it's real, we got to look at it so that we can see the truth that is behind it. And it says, now we're going to undo the ego's thought system, which the Course calls an error. We're going to undo this error that is the ego's thought system, and we're going to undo it quietly. And we're going to undo it together. And after we look at it quietly together, then we are going to look beyond the ego's thought system to truth. So the ego is blocking the truth. The ego was made to hide the truth. And we have believed in it. And that's why we're afraid. And that's why we're suffering. So that's why we've got to look at it. Since we made it true, we made it real, we got to look at it and then go beyond it to what is the truth about us. So when it's talking about the ego's thought system, we got to look at it. It's talking about, basically, it's talking about we got to look at our problems. We got to look at our conflicts. Our conflicts and our problems and our ego, it doesn't go away by not looking at it. Yes, it's not pleasant to look at what the ego is, because the ego is literally a fearful thought. And the ego literally is teaching you that you are guilty and that you deserve only punishment, not love, that you're guilty, you're bad, you're wrong, and you deserve punishment. And the ego is telling you that the only way to heal or correct someone who's guilty is to punish them. That is literally what the ego believes about us. That's what it's teaching us. And so we've got it. So it's ugly. It's ugly. So yeah, it's not pleasant to look at that ugly, mean, cruel thought system that we have, but it's the only way to dispel it and go beyond it to the loving, abundant, everlasting truth that it was hiding. So, and because we're doing it together, then we can do it calmly and we can do it quietly. All right. Yeah, you don't want to look at your ego by yourself. Not at all. You want to look at your ego with someone who knows the truth about you. You want to look at the ego with someone who knows that you are not your ego. You may be harboring an ego, listening to your ego and believing your ego, but it's not you. That's just a belief system about you that you learned from the past from people who didn't know the truth about themselves. So since we're together and we have the Course, which is the lamp, we're going to look at the ego and the ego's thought system together to dispel it. All right. So, paragraph 2. It says, what is healing but the removal of all that stands in the way of knowledge? So, what is the release from suffering? What is healing but the removal of everything that stands in the way of knowing the truth about yourself? That's what healing is. I am removing, dispelling everything that's hiding the truth about myself from myself. That's what healing is. And how else can you dispel illusions about yourself? How can you dispel the lies that you learned about yourself except by looking at the lies that you learned about yourself and looking at them directly, which means without protecting them? So, how can you dispel and unlearn what you learned about yourself in the past as guilty and deserving only punishment unless you look at what you learned, unless you look at the lies you learned about yourself and look at them directly, which means without hiding them or protecting them. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to look at the lies that you learned about yourself in the past, because all you're going to be looking at is the source of fear. And surely you've learned by now, it's assuming that we've been reading, the previous 10 chapters, says, and surely you've learned by now that fear is not real. So what we've been learning in the first 10 chapters of A Course in Miracles is that fear is an illusion. Fear is not real. So what fear tells you and what fear would show you, what fear is telling you and is not true about you. Because what is true about you, as created and established by your creator, could give rise only to joy, could give only rise to love, right? Because God is not fear. And so anything that comes from God does not make fearful. It is not fearful. So if you are experiencing fear, then you are experiencing something that is not true. You are experiencing an illusion, a deception, a lie. So as we look at the ego's thought system, as we look at the ego itself, we are going to be looking at the source of fear. What is the ego? It's the source of fear. Your fear is not coming from outside of you. Your fear is not coming from something you've done or not done. Your fear, your problems are coming from fear, right? The fear, the source, the ego is the source of fear. Your fears are coming from the ego. Your fears, your problems, they're coming from the ego. They're not coming from reality. They're not coming from your truth. Your sufferings, your ego is, when you look at your ego, you're looking at the source of fear. That's where all the fear is coming from. It's not coming from reality. Your fears are not coming from reality. Your fears are not coming from the truth about you or the truth about reality. Your fears are coming from the ego. And because that is what the ego is, it is a fearful belief system that you learned about you that isn't true. So don't be afraid to look at your ego, because all you're going to be looking at is the source of fear. And the Course has been teaching us fear is not real. Isn't that deep? Very deep concept. What did we learn in the world? Fear is real. Fear is showing me something that's real and true. And so I need to be afraid of it in order to be safe and happy. That's what we've learned from the past. Of Course in Miracles is teaching us fear isn't real, meaning you're believing something that's not true. You're seeing something that's not there. You're hearing what wasn't said. You're seeing what isn't true when you're experiencing fear or a symptom of fear. So it says, now we have accepted the fact already that fear's effects can be dispelled merely by denying the reality of the effects of fear. So what is our problems? It's just a side effect of fear. Every single problem, every little bit of our suffering is a side effect of fear. That's what it is. Oh, I must have been experiencing some fear to have this side effect, right? So then it says, so if you want to dispel one of the effects of fear, which is any kind of suffering, then the way to dispel a side effect of fear is merely to deny the reality of the fearful effect, which is the problem. So we go, this problem, this suffering is coming from fear. But if fear isn't real and true, then this side effect, this effect of fear, it can't be real and true either. And that's the way you dispel an effect of fear. You go, this problem right here, that's coming from fear. And fear is not real and true. And so this effect, the side effect of fear, can't be real or true. That's how you dispel the effects of fear. So I want you to tell yourself about whatever way that you're suffering or experiencing conflict right now. I want you to tell yourself, this problem, it's a side effect of fear. It's coming from fear. It's not coming from the world. It's not coming from God. It's not coming from my guilt or my inadequacy. It's coming from fear. That's where it's coming from, this problem. And it's coming from my fear, their fear, whatever. But it's certainly not coming from reality. It's not coming from God. It's not coming from my true self. It's not coming from my reality. This problem, this suffering is coming from fear. That's it. And so if it's true that fear isn't real, like the Course is teaching us, then what's coming from the fear that's not real also can't be real. So we're denying the effects of fear. And that's how you dispel the side effects of fear. Anybody got any fear side effects going on out there? Yes, I'm experiencing the side effects of fear in terms of the experience of war. You know, that's definitely a side effect of fear, and it is frightening until you look at what it is and where it's coming from, and then you interpret that as from the perspective of reality and truth. So I would say to myself, this war that I'm seeing out here, it is coming from fear, and I'm learning that fear is not real, and so that war cannot be real. Like, of course, like in the workbook where it says that only what God has created is real, and war did not come from God, so war cannot be real. But that's how you dispel war. That's how you dispel any side effect, anything that's coming from fear. You go, this is coming from fear, and fear is not real and true. Okay, so that's how A Course in Miracles is teaching us how to dispel the effects of fear in our lives and in our world. Isn't that beautiful? Because I can't go to Washington and tell them this is crazy, this is insane. Don't do that. Don't you realize you're only hurting your own people? Don't you realize that's not going to produce joy and prosperity and peace and security for anybody anywhere in the world? I can't do that, but I can look at the symptom of fear, and I can identify it correctly, and I can identify the source of it and remember that the source of it is not real and true, and so it can't be real and true itself, right? Like it tells us later on this section, all power comes from God, and all power is of God, and what didn't come from God has no power to do anything. So this is fear. Fear didn't come from God. And so this effect, like war or suffering or cancer, whatever, can't be real either. You know, if this effect, this problem came from something that ain't real and true, then it can't be real and true itself. This is how you dispel the source of the problem and also the effects of the problem. All right. Hi, DR. Lovely to see you. Lovely to see you. Lovely to have you here. All right. As you can see, we're in chapter 11, section 5. And the title of the section in the book is The Dynamics of Fear. So if you guys wouldn't mind, liking, sharing, and subscribing, that would be so helpful. That lets the algorithm know that this content is wanted, and it pushes this content out to more viewers. And what could the world need more than this, than this content? This is the content that truly does bring about peace on earth and goodwill toward all beings, right? This is content that truly does have the potential to bring about real peace and real healing for all the world, for all of humanity. And that's why it's not more popular. That's why you have not heard about it as much as you have heard about other belief systems. But you can change all that by liking, sharing, and subscribing. So thank you for doing that. Okay, so now we're going to go on to, I'm going to go now to, I'm going to skip down for time's sake to sentence number 8, where it says, so don't be afraid then to look upon fear. Don't be afraid to look upon the ego. Don't be afraid to look upon the fear that is the source and the cause of all the problems, right? Of Course in Miracles isn't saying look at the problems and try to figure out how to fix them. The Course in Miracles is saying, I want you to look at the source of these problems, which is fear. And I want you to remember the truth about the source of the fear and the source of the problem, which is fear. So it says, don't be afraid to look at the fear that is the source of these problems. It says, the reason you shouldn't be afraid to look upon the fear that is behind all these problems is because when you really look at fear, the Course says it really can't be seen. So what does that mean? Well, when you look upon the fear with truth, then you are looking upon the fear with clarity. And clarity undoes confusion by definition. So that means that when you look upon fear with truth in your awareness, it undoes your confusion. It undoes the fear. Okay. Fear is confusion. Fear is a confusion between what is real and what is not. Right. So when you look upon the fear with truth, then it literally dispels the confusion that the fear is. Fear is not knowing the truth. Fear is being confused between reality and illusion. So when you look upon the fear with the awareness of truth in your mind, it undoes the fear. Just like light undoes the darkness when you walk into a dark room and flip on the light switch. So, and it says, and when you look upon the fear with the truth, then the truth, the light, must dispel it. When you look upon your fear with the truth in your awareness, your fear is dispelled. And then all the effects of your fear are also dispelled. Okay. So that was paragraph 2. Let's take a breath. It's a very powerful, very deep section that really is teaching us how to dispel the cause of the suffering, which then dispels the side effects. Okay, suffering is a side effect. Suffering is an effect of a cause. Suffering doesn't happen in a vacuum. like suffering just doesn't happen out of the blue. All suffering, all pain is an effect of a cause that you are not aware of. And when you look upon the cause of the effect, the cause that had been hidden to you, then the effects disappear as well. When you look upon the cause of the problem and see it through the eyes of truth, then the effects of the cause are dispelled. So we want to tell ourselves, when in whatever area we're suffering, we want to tell ourselves, well, this is a effect of fear. That's what it is. It's not coming from out there. It's coming from, an effect of fear in my mind. That's what I'm really looking at. That's what's really happening here. All these suffering, all these problems, all this conflict, all this world war, it is all an effect. It's an effect of a cause that's in my mind called fear that isn't true. It's just really deep. I mean, I don't know if I ever heard from any other curriculum or philosophy before A Course in Miracles that fear is an illusion, that fear is not true, right? Fear is the belief that there's something to fear. The fear is the belief that you're separate and alone and guilty. All things that are not true. Those are just things that you learned from people who didn't know the truth about themselves, who learned it from people who didn't know the truth about themselves, who learned it from people who didn't know the truth about themselves. So when you're afraid, you are believing something that's not true, right? Because if you were aware of the nature of reality, you could be only happy. You could be only rejoicing. You could only be at peace. You could only be experiencing lasting love and joy and peace and abundance if you were aware of reality, what is real, what is the nature of reality. It can never give rise to pain and suffering or fear. So if you're experiencing fear, you are believing something that is not real or true. That's what A Course in Miracles says. It's hard to believe, but as soon as you apply that and use these truths, like, okay, I don't really understand or believe that, but I'm going to do what it said to do. I'm going to go, this problem, this suffering is coming from fear. It's just an effect of the cause of fear that's in my mind. And I am now going to look upon the fear in my mind with the help of my loving right mind, and then only to see that the fear was not based on my truth, on the reality of anyone and anything. And then I'm going to be released from that fear, and then all the effects that came from that fear are just going to go back to the nothingness from which they came. So the Course in Miracles says you don't have to believe these ideas. It's only the use of the ideas that show you that they're true. So don't wait to use these ideas till you believe them. You need to use these ideas because you don't believe them. You're suffering because you don't believe that fear is an illusion, that fear isn't true, right? And only when you apply these ideas to your fears and the side effects of your fears, only then do you go, oh, what I was fearing wasn't true, wasn't real. It was just something I learned that I didn't question. I didn't look at it. I didn't look into it. I just accepted it as reality when it was never true about me or anyone. That's why you got to look at the fear in order to dispel it. When you look at the fear with the truth beside you, that's when you go, oh, what I learned about myself from the past was never true. I learned from the past that there's something wrong with me. I learned from the past that I'm alone. I learned from the past that I'm guilty and I deserve punishment. And oh, that was never true. And it's not that the people who taught me that were bad. They had never learned the truth about themselves. So they're innocent, right? But now I want to look at my fears so that I can see that they're not based on my reality or any reality. So we're talking about the dynamics of fear and how to dispel it, right? How to dispel fear and how to dispel all the side effects of my fear. And the side effects of my fear are everything that I'm suffering and struggling with, everything that hurts me, everything that that every way in which I perceive that I'm suffering. It's coming from fear, fear that I've never looked at and never questioned, right? Okay. So then it says, paragraph 3. So let us begin this lesson in ego dynamics, fear dynamics, by understanding that the term ego dynamics itself doesn't mean anything. Because in fact, the term ego dynamics, it contains exactly the contradiction in terms that makes this concept, ego dynamics, meaningless. Explain, please, of course. Okay. The word dynamics, which is in quotations, implies the power to do something. So when you say ego dynamics, it's implying that the ego has the power to do something. And the whole separation fallacy lies in the belief that the ego has the power to do anything. So the whole separation lie that, you can call it the original error, the detour into fear, the fall from grace, whatever you want to call the whole separation fallacy, lies in the belief that the ego has the power to do anything, right? So when we're talking about ego dynamics, in a way, it's a contradictory term because the ego doesn't have any power to do anything. Yes, it appears to you that it does because you've given it that power because you didn't know the truth. But in truth, the ego, since it wasn't created by God, has no power to do anything. Your ego cannot do anything. It can't change who and what you are. It can't change the nature of reality. It can't change how God has created you to be. It can't change the eternal nature of you. It cannot change the forever guiltless nature of yourself. It cannot change that you are a spirit and not a body that cannot die. The ego can't do anything. It can't change you from how God created you to be, and it only seems to have power and only seems to have power over you and be scary because you believe that the ego has the power to change you from how love created you to be to something that's guilty and deserves punishment. That's the only reason it seems to be powerful. It's the only reason your ego, your fears, your guilt seems to be powerful. It's because you have given it that power. The ego has no power to do anything in itself. Because remember, the ego wasn't created by God. And all power is of God. And what God has not created has no power to do anything. I'm afraid of my ego because I believe my ego has the power to make me something other than the way God created me to be, which is guiltless and eternal. Okay. And so that's why I'm afraid of my ego. But when I realize, the ego's not a God, so it don't have any power to do anything, and so I'm still as God created me, well, then what is there to fear? Nothing. Nothing. All right. When you question the source of the fear and realize that it ain't true, then whatever came from that fear is dispelled. It's gone. Isn't that beautiful? So beautiful. All right. Okay. Now it says, right, the word dynamics implies the power to do something, and the whole separation lies in the belief that the ego has the power to do anything. And the ego is fearful because you believe that the ego has power to do something. But the truth is very simple. All power is of God, and what is not of God has no power to do anything. And so when we look at the ego, then we're not considering laws or dynamics. When we look at the ego, we're considering delusions. So better than saying the dynamics of the ego to say the delusions of the ego, right? So what does it say? You're afraid of the ego because you believe the ego does have power to do something, right? But the ego doesn't. And so, what we're talking about here is not the dynamics or the power of the ego. We're talking about the delusions of the ego. So that's what's the ego is all about. The ego doesn't have any power. The ego is just a deluding, deceiving belief system that whose purpose is to make you believe something that's not real and true so that you might suffer, because that's the ego's purpose. The ego's purpose is that you be afraid, and that you be afraid of your source and yourself and everyone and everything. That's the ego's purpose, that you be afraid of everyone and everything all the time. That's the purpose of the ego. Because remember, what is the ego? It's just fear. It's a belief system based on fear. It's a belief system that fear is what's real and true for you and everyone. That's what the ego is. It's a thought system that's always telling you you should be afraid, and that fear is a justified response to reality. The ego's belief system tells you that reality is fearful, and the ego's belief system is telling you that because you're guilty, you should always be afraid of the punishment that you deserve because you're guilty. That is the ego's belief system. Now, it masks it and hides it you know in in a mask that looks like love. Like the ego's like, I'm your friend here, I'm your only friend here, so you should listen to me and I will keep you safe. Now, here's how you are going to keep yourself safe. You should be afraid of everyone and everything, and you should feel guilty, and you should believe that because you're guilty, you deserve punishment, and that you never deserve to be happy because you're guilty. And so you should be afraid of everyone and everything. That is the ego's belief system. And until you look at your ego's belief system without shrinking, then you are going to believe it and you are going to be manifesting it. That's why it's so important in this section that you look at the ego's belief system. You need to look at what the ego is believing. You need to look at what the ego is telling you is true. You got to look at it, because that's the only way that you'll be like, oh, well, how could that be true? Oh, no, that don't make any sense at all. That can't be true. That can't be real. Right? And then you are free from it. So that's what we're doing. The Course in Miracles is teaching us how to look on the ego, our ego, without fear, so that we can see that it's lying to us, so that we can go beyond what it's trying to convince us of, to listen to and accept the truth about ourselves. And the truth about ourselves is something that you could never, ever, ever in a million years be afraid of. The truth about us gives only rise to joy and peace and love and safety and abundance. So if you're suffering in any way, shape, or form, it's because because you're believing the ego. You're listening to the ego, you're believing the ego, and you're not questioning it, and you're not bringing it to the light of truth. All right. And so then it says, so when you're looking at the ego, you're not looking at a power, you're looking at a delusion. That's what you're looking at. When you look at your ego, you're not looking at something that's big and scary, powerful. When you look at your ego's belief system, you're looking at a set of delusions. Okay. And we can surely regard a delusional thought system without fear, right? Because a delusional thought system cannot have any effects if the delusional thought system source is not true. And then fear becomes more obviously inappropriate if you recognize the ego's goal, which is so clearly senseless that any effort exerted on the ego's behalf is necessarily expended on nothing. So that's what you see when you look at the ego. You go, oh, that's a delusional thought system that was never true, could never be true. And so I don't need to be afraid of it. And any effort at all exerted on behalf of this delusional thought system that I learned from the past is expended on nothing. Okay? That's what you are able to see when you actually look at the ego, at its thought system, and what it would tell you, and what comes from it. So, but we were like, oh, I don't want to look. I don't want to look at my ego. Oh my God, it's going to be so ugly and horrible. I don't want to look at my ego because I'll be looking at my truth, and my truth is so ugly and so guilty that I would rush to death by my own hand if I actually looked at my own truth. That's why we're afraid to look at the ego, because we think that we're looking at ourselves. But the truth is that when you look at the ego thought system, that's not you. That's just something you learned. We're afraid to look within. We're afraid to know ourselves. We're afraid to go, let me look within here. We're afraid to do that. That's why we're all distraction addicts, because we're afraid to look within. We're afraid to look within, thinking that who we really are is the ego. And we don't want to look at such ugliness, such guilt, such shameful, things, thinking that that's us. And so, but it's only in looking at the ego, realizing that we're seeing the ugliness and the shame and the guilt that we're seeing. That's not us. That's not us. That's the ego, which is just a belief system that we learned in the past from those who did not know the truth about themselves. So, but until you realize that, you're going to be too afraid to look within at your ego. And so your ego will go uncorrected. And so your ego will go on directing your life unconsciously. So we're afraid. The ego's like, you better not look within, because your eyes are going to light on such ugliness that you will want to kill yourself. So don't look within, which is just the ego saying, don't look at me. Don't look too closely at me, because I'm you and I'm ugly. And if you look within and see me, you're going to be seeing yourself, and you're going to want to kill yourself because of what you saw. So that's why the last thing on earth the ego wants you to do is look within and look at the ego. It doesn't want you to look within and look at the source of fear. Ego don't want you to see it, right? It's like the wizard, the Wizard of Oz, that doesn't want you to see the behind the screen. Right. It wants to bully you and terrify you. And it doesn't want you to look behind the screen to see that the wizard is a little old midget who is nothing but a little midget who is not this terrifying being that has all this power. And of course, miracles is helping us to not be afraid to look within, to look at the source of our fear, which is the ego. Because it knows that as soon as we look at it with truth beside us, we're going to be like, wait a minute, I've been living in fear and shame for something that wasn't ever even true. Right? It doesn't want us to see through its lies and its illusions, just like the Wizard of Oz didn't want people to see that it didn't have any power at all. It was just a weak little insecure weakling, right? The ego don't want you to see that. So that's why the ego says, don't look within, don't look within, don't look within. The ego tells you that if you do look within, your eyes are going to light on such horror that you're going to rush to death by your own hand, only to live on, realizing that you can't kill yourself. So you did all that for nothing. So that's what the Course in Miracles is helping us to do, so that we can dispel the fear, dispel the ego, and be free from its imprisonment, from its cruelty, right? Because the ego is cruel, and I mean cruel to the max, truly. Nothing rivals the cruelty of the ego, right? But the ego has no power when you see what it is. When you look behind the screen and go, ew, you're just nothing but a little scared, insecure weakling. You don't have power over me, right? The ego don't want you to do that. So that's why it seems so difficult to meditate, to look within, to get quiet. It seems so difficult. It's like terrifying. It's one of our biggest fears, is to get quiet and to look within. One of our biggest fears is to set down all of our distractions and look within and look at what we're afraid of. So the Course in Miracles is helping us to do that. So in paragraph 4, it says, the ego's goal quite explicitly is ego autonomy. What does that mean? Well, from the beginning, then, the ego's purpose is to be separate, sufficient unto itself, and independent of any power except its own. That's the ego's goal. The ego's like, I'm God. I came from myself, and I'm God. That's the ego's goal. That you think that that's all that you are. That the ego came from itself. It came out of nothing. It didn't come from anywhere. And that the ego wants you to believe that it exists independently of you. That's what your ego wants you to believe. That the ego don't want you to know that it is maintained by your choice. They don't want you to know that. Ego wants you to think that it is you and it is God, right? The ego doesn't want you to know that it's a belief in your mind that you can stop believing at any moment and the ego would be gone, right? It don't want you to know that. It wants you to think that it's independent of you. It's autonomous. And this is why the ego is the symbol of separation. Every idea has a purpose, and the ego's purpose is always the natural extension of what the ego is. And so everything that stems from the ego is the natural outcome of the ego's central belief. And the way to undo the ego's results, which is all your problems, is merely to recognize that the source of all your problems, the ego, is not natural, which means that the ego is out of accord with your true nature. So ego don't want you to know that it's not you. Your ego is not you. That's not your true nature. It's not your true nature to be the ego. It's not your nature to be afraid. It's not your ego to be separate. It's not your nature to be disconnected. It's not your nature to be guilty. It's not your nature to deserve punishment. That's not you. That's not your nature. And so I love it where it says the only way to undo the effects of the ego is to recognize that the ego is not your natural self. That's not you. And so when you go, wait a minute, that I have an ego, but I'm not my ego. And this problem came from my ego, which isn't me, my natural self, then the problems which came from your ego are gone. They are dispelled. It's the only way to undo the effects of your ego, of realizing this came from my ego, but the ego isn't me. That's not my natural self. That's not my true self. It's not my true self to be afraid. and then to produce fearful effects. That's the only way to undo the effects of your ego. I love that. I just love that. Here's my ego. Here's the effect of me believing that my ego is me. And here's this problem. And it's an extension of my belief that I'm separate and guilty. But I can undo the effect, that problem by realizing that this came from my ego and that's not me and it's not the truth about me. Okay. And then that's the end of the effects of my ego. Okay. I love it. So it says, we once said that to will contrary to God is wishful thinking, which means not real willing. God's will is one because the extension of God's will cannot be unlike itself. So the real conflict which we're experiencing is just between our ego's wishful thinking and the will of God, which we share. And then it asks us, could that be a real conflict? So the conflict that we're experiencing is only a conflict between my wishful thinking, my ego thinking, which is wishful thinking, and what's really true. That's it. This problem is representing my ego thinking versus what is true. That's it. So I have this problem because I am siding with wishful thinking, which is ego thinking, that I'm guilty and as their punishment, versus what is true and real and reality, which is God's will. So I'm suffering because I'm siding with my ego's wishful thinking. Whatever my ego believes, wishes, wants, does, that's all wishful thinking. My ego's belief system is wishful thinking. All my fear, all my guilt, all my conflict, all my pain, all my anger, all my grievances, all that belief that I'm alone and separate and on my own, that is all wishful thinking. It's all coming from my ego, which is one big fat wish for what's not true and not real about myself and reality. Okay. And I have this problem because I'm thinking with my ego, which only wishes and wants for what's not real and true, called guilt and separation. But if I decided that my ego isn't who I really am, and I decided to accept and side with what is real and true, which is God's will, then I would have no more conflict. I have no more suffering. Wow. Okay. All right. I'm going to go back to letting you know where we're at. Beautiful. And take a breath. Okay. So now we're going to go on to paragraph 6. And let me see if I want to, I know we're not going to have time to finish it, so I'm going to see what I want to focus on. I love it. Okay. So then I'm going to go to paragraph 9 so that we can get through more of it in the remaining 15 minutes or so that we have. Okay. So I'm going to go to paragraph 9, and it says, okay, we'll go to paragraph 8. What you must learn to recognize is that the last thing your ego wishes you to realize is that you are afraid of the ego. The ego don't want you to know that you're afraid of the ego. Why? Because if you realize that it's your ego giving rise to fear, then you are going to decrease your dependence on the ego. Right. And you're going to realize that listening to the ego is weakening your power. The ego's like, I can save you from fear. I can protect you from fear. So listen to me. Says, without that belief, you would never listen to your ego because it's mean and it's scary and it tells you things that make you afraid. And so for the ego to convince you to continue to listen to it, the ego's got to lie to you and convince you that it can protect you from fear, even though it's producing the fear, right? And so the ego doesn't want you to realize that it's making you afraid. Because if you realize, oh, every time I listen to my ego, I have more fear and more problems, then you would stop listening to your ego. So your ego's got to convince you that it's not producing fear, that it's protecting you from fear. Yet, so then it says, and how can your ego's existence continue if you realize that by accepting the ego, you are belittling yourself and depriving yourself of power? So the last thing the ego wants you to realize is that it is what is making you afraid, right? So the egos be like, oh, what's making you afraid is the weather. What's making you afraid is the war. What's making you afraid is the government. What's making you afraid is this problem, this cancer. What's making you afraid is the economy. What's making you afraid is blah, blah, something about the body. The ego doesn't want, the last thing the ego wants you to know is that it is what's making you afraid. Because once you realize that, you're going to stop listening to your ego. And it don't want you to do that. And it says, now the ego can and does allow you to regard yourself as supercilious, unbelieving, lighthearted, distant, emotionally shallow, callous, uninvolved, and even desperate, but not really afraid. And so minimizing fear but not the undoing of fear is the ego's constant effort. And the ego is very skillful at minimizing your fear, but not undoing your fear. So that's what the ego's up to. Right? The ego doesn't want you to look at the ego and go, you're the source of my fear. You're the one making me afraid, not what's happening outside of me. You're the one making me afraid. You're not making me feel more safe. You're not protecting me. You're not making me feel bigger or safer. You're the one making me afraid, ego. The ego doesn't want you to realize that. So what the ego is all about is minimizing your fear, which to me means suppressing, repressing, distracting, numbing your fear. That's what the ego is all about. I'm going to help you numb your fear, distract you from your fear, so that you don't look at me, the ego, and let me go, right? So the ego doesn't really want you to feel your fear, because if you're really aware of the fear, you may look at the ego and go, hey, you're not protecting me from fear. You're making me feel afraid. And I'm not going to listen to you anymore. So all the ego can do is minimize your fear. So make you numb to it, distract you from it, so that you don't experience your fear. So if you ask people, are you afraid? They'll say, no, I'm not afraid. They'll just say, I'm upset, I'm sick, I'm broke, or I'm, most people don't realize that they're afraid, right? And if you say, are you afraid? They go, no, I'm just irritated, or I'm just upset, or I'm just, sick today, or, so the ego is genius at minimizing the fear so that you don't look at the real cause of fear, which is ego, and let the ego go and stop listening to it. And so, paragraph 10, your recognition that whatever seems to separate you from joy is only fear, regardless of the form it takes, and quite apart from how the ego wants you to experience that fear, is therefore the ego's basic threat. That's the last thing the ego wants to happen, is for you to go, oh, whatever is separating me from my joy and my peace, it's fear. And it's coming from my ego. That is the basic ego threat. That's the last thing. That's the ego's biggest fear. It was that you go, whatever's separating me from my joy, peace, and abundance, that's fear. It's just fear. And fear is coming from the ego. It's not coming from God. It's not coming from reality. That's the ego's biggest fear. So that's the thing that we want to be saying to ourselves when we are experiencing something that seems to be separating us from our joy and peace and abundance, right? We need to say, this is fear. And fear comes from the ego, my belief in the ego. And so the ego is making me afraid, not the world war, not the government, not what could happen to the body, not this, not them, not that outside of me. This is fear. And fear is coming from my ego. So my fear is not, my ego is not my friend, like it's trying to tell me that it is. The ego is like the worst friend you ever had, who's like, I'm your best friend. I got your back. I'm here to protect you. I'm here to help you to not be afraid. And then all the while it's stabbing you in the back, right? That's what the ego is. And until you see what the ego is and how it works and what it's up to, then you will continue to be deceived by the ego. And you will continue to let it make you afraid and produce problems of fear, right? So the ego's greatest threat is you go, oh, this problem is coming from fear. And fear in my mind is coming from the ego that I'm listening to in my mind. Right? That's its biggest fear, which means that's the answer. So that's what we want to do with whatever it is that seems to separate us from our joy and peace and abundance. We want to say, this is fear, and fear only comes from the ego in my mind. And so I am not going to continue to listen to the ego. I am going to listen only to the truth. And what is the truth? It's something that doesn't produce fear. It is something that is telling you that there's nothing to fear, because fear doesn't come from God. And so fear isn't real. It isn't true. What fear is showing you is not what reality is, because reality could only give rise to joy and love and abundance and everlasting life. So if you're if you're suffering, it's coming from fear, it's coming from the ego in your mind that you are listening to, that you are believing. And as soon as you go, oh, this problem is coming from fear, which is coming from the ego in my mind, and I don't have to believe that, it's because I'm not the ego, and now I'm going to listen to the truth about me, which could never give rise to fear. That's it. That's how you dispel the ego and all that comes from the ego, which is all the suffering, all the pain. All right. So, guys, that's where I'm going to stop today, as we're at an hour and a half. And so I just wanted to tell you about my new website, Divine Revolution ARQ. And through becoming a member of my website, you can access my writings, my blog, my Course in Miracles recordings. You can access the list of my classes when I'm teaching. You can contact me for a miracle psychotherapeutic session if you would like that. And also as a member, then you can join me in my members only Zoom classes that I'll be doing once a month or maybe twice a month. So, and it doesn't cost anything to become a member, but there are tiers of membership. And then there are different things that you can access with different tiers, but it doesn't cost anything to become a member. And it's a great way to access more of my work. And also, it's a great way to support this ministry. And thank you for that. So just go to Divine Revolution ARQ, become a member, and then we can connect more deeply in terms of writing sessions, Zoom meetings, things like that. So now that I've said that, now I want to just do a 2-minute integration meditation where we take these ideas and we just breathe and use them and allow them to integrate a little bit deeper into our awareness. All right, so I'm going to turn up the music a little bit here. And if you are able to, I want you to close your eyes and take a breath. All right. Just breathe and feel. How does it feel to have heard these ideas today? How does it feel to hear the ideas of A Course in Miracles? Just notice how it feels in your mind, in your heart, in your body, in your emotions, to have heard the truth about the ego in your mind, which is the source of fear in your mind and in your life. What does it feel like to hear the truth about the real source of fear and problems in your life? Does it feel hopeful that knowing that once you know the real source of the problem, and that it's just coming from the ego belief system in your mind, that now that you have a real chance, a real way to dispel those problems that came from your fears? Does that feel hopeful? It's hopeful because here's something that you haven't tried yet that does work to dispel problems that came from fear in your mind. Now I want you to bring to your awareness a situation or a relationship that where you're feeling afraid or angry or guilty or sick or broke. Just bring to your awareness any situation where you're not experiencing peace, love, joy, and abundance and safety. I want you to bring that situation or relationship to your awareness. And I want you to tell yourself, this problem is coming from fear in my mind. And this fear in my mind is being generated by the ego in my mind. This problem that's coming from this fear is not coming from anywhere outside of myself. It's coming from the ego in my mind, whose one purpose is that I feel afraid all the time. Take a breath. Now I want you to tell yourself, But the ego in my mind, this belief system, is not real or true, and it is not me. This fear is coming from a belief system that is not true, that I learned from the past. Tell yourself the truth. And remember, looking upon the fear, which is the darkness, with the light of truth, dispels the fear and all the effects of the fear. I want you to tell yourself about this problem. This is only fear. And fear is not true. It's coming from a lie that I learned in the past. And I want you to tell yourself, this problem, which has come from the fear of my ego, is not coming from God. This problem, this fear, is not of God. And so it has no power to do anything. I want you to tell yourself, all power is of God. And what is not of God, like fear, has no power to do anything. And so I need not be afraid of it. And now I want you to turn toward the light within yourself. And remember that the real you is created by God and can never, ever give rise to fear. And I want you to tell yourself, I am not my fearful ego. I remain exactly as I was created by God, in perfect love, in perfect peace, and eternal life. I am as God created me. My ego is not who I am. My ego did not create me. And so my ego has no power over me. I remain exactly as I was created by God, which is only love. And so there is nothing to fear. I remain as God created me, and there is nothing to fear. I cannot be changed by anything the ego lies to me about. I remain exactly as love created me, and so there is nothing to fear. Beautiful. And then when you're ready, open your eyes and take a breath. Bring your awareness back to your body, back to the space that you're in. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Leslie. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right, you guys. Check out my website, Divine Revolution ARQ, and a lot of my writings are there. And so beautiful. Thank you all for joining this broadcast. I profoundly appreciate you being here, sharing and joining in these ideas. I appreciate you sharing this broadcast in whatever way you may want to do that, liking, sharing, and subscribing. Thank you for doing that. That's how we strengthen the power of these ideas in this world. And so by your joining these ideas, sharing this broadcasting, you are strengthening these ideas going out into the world that so desperately needs these ideas. So on behalf of the world that you are healing and saving by joining on these ideas and sharing them, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I will see you next time I see you. And I'm so happy to be you.